Before we dive into today's video, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Sheath Underwear. I know what you might be thinking, underwear? Really, Simon? But trust me, these boxer briefs are an absolute game changer. I'm wearing them right now. I didn't take these off to show you. I have more than one pair of Sheath underwear. And look, I don't think I could go back to my old underwear even if I tried. Sheath has something that they call dual pouch technology, which keeps everything in place in separate pockets, and this prevents, the weather's getting hot, it's just more comfortable, it's less sticky. And if that's not your thing, no worries, you could just wear it like a regular pair of underwear too. Sometimes I do that, like when I'm in the gym, I'll just wear it like regular underwear, and it's just a little bit more comfortable when, doing some exercises. But seriously, these aren't the most comfortable boxer briefs that I've ever worn. They're stretchy, they've got moisture wicking technology, and they keep you cool and comfortable all day long. Plus, Sheath just released new bamboo pairs that are perfect for any weather. And the best part, if you use the promo code SHADOWS at checkout, you're going to get 20% off your order. So you can't really go wrong. Head to sheathunderwear.com, get one pair, and then the next thing you know, you'll be buying 5 more. It's just how Sheath works. And with Sheath's new super fast website, it's never been easier. So when you check out, don't forget to use the promo code SHADOWS for that sweet, sweet discount. So thank you, Sheath, for sponsoring. And now today's video. In 2023, 32 years since the end of the Cold War, it would be nice to think that the chaos of a nuclear arms race was long behind us. Unfortunately, though, in February, tensions between Russia and the US over Ukraine had Vladimir Putin withdrawing from arms agreements and waving his monster Satan II MIRV missile about. It has been called an engineering miracle and a crowning achievement in rocket technology, and Putin has described it as the next generation of nuclear missile. It can fly across both the North and South Poles and penetrate all current anti-ballistic missile defenses, rendering it basically invincible. In response to Putin's alarming change of rhetoric, US President Biden reminded the world that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. We've avoided the apocalypse so far with a guarantee of mutually assured destruction, but MIRVs threaten to tip the scales, and it's not just Russia that we have to worry about anymore. So MIRV stands for Multiple Independently Targetable Re-entry Vehicles, which essentially means it's a missile that can carry several warheads that can be aimed at different targets. Lovely. The term is usually applied to intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, carrying thermonuclear warheads, allowing for the horrifying possibility of targeted nuclear cluster bombing. In a typical MIRV launch sequence, the missile is ejected from its silo and taken to altitude in 3 boost stages. Then, 180 seconds after launch, the missile reaches suborbital height and the post-boost vehicle, known as a bus, breaks away. Now this bus, which houses the warheads, then maneuvers itself to prepare for deployment. Finally, the warheads are released and a flight computer guides each one to its target. Stuffing a missile with multiple warheads provides 4 clear offensive advantages. Firstly, more warheads means more damage. Obviously, 7 nuclear warheads is going to do more damage than 1 nuclear warhead. But it goes beyond just that, because a lot of small nuclear warheads are going to cause more damage than a single large one. This is all because radiation and pressure from a nuclear blast falls steeply with distance. For example, blast pressure at 4 kilometers is only a 64th of the pressure at 1 kilometer. This means that MIRVs can achieve the desired destruction levels with fewer expensive missiles, launches, and launch facilities. Secondly, MIRVs are excellent at overwhelming anti-ballistic missile defenses, ABMs, which are often designed to bring down just a single warhead at a time. Thirdly, MIRVs have enough room to carry penetration aids. These are devices that increase the likelihood of the warheads evading ABMs and hitting their target. The most common choice are decoys. These are inexpensive, unarmed, optically identical copies of the warheads which are launched at the same time. Some also emit noise and light to increase the likelihood of attracting the attention of the ABMs. Another option is chaff. This is a cloud of aluminium, metallized glass fiber, or plastic that can confuse radar-guided missile defenses. Evading ABMs dramatically increases the probability of a successful attack. For example, a typical warhead ICBM might have a 50% chance of destroying its target. A MIRV can send 2 warheads and 2 decoys to that same target, virtually guaranteeing success. And it'll still have enough left over to destroy 2 or 3 more. And so that brings us to our final advantage. MIRVs can attack multiple targets simultaneously, up to 1,500 kilometers apart. This means that one successful launch could result in the destruction of 5 or more high-value targets. Launching multiple MIRVs could wipe out the enemy's entire land-based arsenal in one go. It is terrifying stuff. Now, many people attribute the development of MIRVs to the invention of anti-ballistic missile systems. After all, reducing the effectiveness of ABMs is one of their key features. The timing was also pretty coincidental. You see, in 1962, America announced that its Minuteman had entered service. This was an ICBM which used solid fuel, allowing it to stand ready for long periods without the need to fuel before launch. The name was a nod to the Minutemen of the American Revolutionary War, famed for being ready to fight at short notice. The weapon was branded as a nuclear deterrent, with the ability to reach Soviet cities if the US was ever attacked. Naturally, the Soviets responded by initiating work on a defense system capable of shooting the Minuteman down, and came up with the A350 anti-ballistic missile launcher, which NATO would call Galosh. So, here's where the coincidence comes in. While Galosh wasn't operational until 1978, the US heard about it long before. So when in 1968 they conducted the test launch of the Minuteman III, the world's first MIRV armed with 3 W-62 Mark 12 warheads, many assumed it was developed as an effort to evade Galosh. This would have made America responsible for the nuclear escalation that followed. However, the Department of Defense gave testimony to Congress between 1968 and 1969, which disputes this assumption. Dr. John Foster, then Director of Defense Research and Engineering, explained that the MIRV was designed to increase targeting capability rather than penetrate ABM defenses. As when they'd been planning their targets for Minuteman II, they'd discovered that the number of desired aim points exceeded the number of Minuteman missiles. Defense Secretary Laird also commented, explaining that the MIRV was a normal outgrowth of regular research and development, which had been under consideration for several years, even prior to the time that we knew of the development of Galosh. Dr. Richard Garwin would later say, "The military wanted MIRVs simply because more warheads are better. You could destroy more targets with them." The reason the motives behind MIRVs are so important is that their invention significantly raised the risk of nuclear war and escalated the arms race. This was the exact opposite of the stabilizing effect that they were meant to achieve. This is because they massively increased the incentive for both sides to strike first. And they did this in 2 ways. First of all, they upset the balance of warheads and silos. Before MIRVs, the first country to strike with single warhead missiles could hit a few silos, but had no chance of destroying them all. This would virtually guarantee a nuclear counterstrike and mutually assured destruction. Therefore, nobody wanted to go first. Now, MIRVs upset this delicate balance by massively increasing the number of missiles per silo. So theoretically, one strike from an arsenal of MIRVs could destroy every silo of their opponents, leaving them unable to retaliate. In fact, it would be feasible to have enough missiles left over for a counterstrike if needed. In this situation, it's clear that achieving first strike would all but guarantee victory, switching the incentive from holding back to going first. This massively increased the temptation for one side to trigger a nuclear war in a time of tension or crisis. So, secondly, one of the advantages of MIRVs, the fact that they require fewer silos and launchers, was also a bad thing. It concentrated firepower in relatively few targets, increasing the likelihood of an enemy wiping out the entire arsenal. This created a use 'em or lose 'em scenario, and again incentivized first strike. The only exception to this is MIRVed submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs. These are considered invulnerable to attack, so they don't raise the same issues as their land-based counterparts. Of course, this only matters if both sides have MIRVed weapons, but As they were in an arms race, Soviets were quick to catch up, and in 1970 they began development of a fourth version of their R-36 missile to allow it to carry multiple warheads. Ironically, their rush to MIRV their missiles was largely influenced by the strategic arms limitation talks SALT conducted in 1969 to curb the arms race, not speed it up. Unfortunately, as it was difficult to verify warhead numbers, SALT settled on limiting the number of launchers instead, and MIRVs became the only way to increase firepower without violating the SALT agreement. SALT was a huge misstep, and Henry Kissinger would later reflect on this, saying, "I wish I had thought through the implications of a MIRVed world more thoughtfully in 1969 and 1970 than I did." Unfortunately for the United States, the Soviet missiles had a greater throw weight than their Minutemen and could therefore carry more warheads. Plus, America's bombers couldn't be MIRVed. This meant that while MIRVing increased America's warhead per missile count by a factor of between 3 and 6, the Soviets increased theirs by a factor of 10. By 1975, they'd closed the gap, and both sides had roughly 2,200 warheads. Now, this was making everyone just a little bit nervous, and it would have been a good time to stop, but as former Defense Secretary Harold Brown put it, when we build, they build. Or when we stop building, they build. So by 1980, America's arsenal had remained unchanged, but the Soviets had increased theirs to 5,630, a huge number of which were fitted to their Monster 10 warhead missiles, the SS-18s named Satan I by NATO. This means that if the Soviets had first strike, they'd be able to wipe out 65 to 80% of America's silos and still have 1,000 warheads left over for a counterstrike. Fortunately, both sides were as nervous as each other about the prospect of nuclear war and the costs of producing ever more warheads. So, as a continuation of SALT, SALT II talks were held between 1972 and 1979 with the aim of limiting the number of MIRVed missiles and banning new missile programs. Unfortunately, just 6 months after the agreement was signed, the US discovered a Soviet combat brigade in Cuba and withdrew from the treaty. It took until 1991 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union for the US and Russia to agree to a new treaty known as the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or START I, which limited nuclear warhead numbers to 6,000. Next came START II, which aimed to ban MIRVs entirely but never came into force. Instead, it was replaced by the Strategic Offensive Reductions Treaty, or SORT, also known as the Demirving Agreement, in which both sides agreed to reduce their number of warheads to between 1,700 and 2,200. Then in 2011, SORT was replaced with New START. This limits the number of warheads on both sides to 1,550 and the number of launches to just 800. It also allows for satellite and remote monitoring, as well as 18 site inspections per year to verify compliance and build trust. So you might be thinking, so far, so good, right? Well, roll on 2023. Technically, New START is still in effect, but on the 21st of February 2023, Vladimir Putin delivered a presidential address in which he announced the suspension of Russia's participation in the agreement. The root of the issue stems from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in which the US has taken the side of Ukraine and is providing them with lethal aid. So, Russia no longer wants the US to access its nuclear facilities for the required inspections, especially as one site, Engels Air Base, is used to launch bombers and missile strikes into Ukraine. Putin also claims that the US has blocked Russian inspectors at their own sites, an accusation that's been strongly denied. What makes Putin's announcements particularly terrifying is that Russia is edging ever closer to a successful test of the RS-28 Sarmat ICBM, a new missile that Putin has described as, quote, a truly unique weapon that will force those who are trying to threaten our country in the heat of frenzied rhetoric to think twice. And unfortunately, he's not exaggerating. If they can work out the kinks, the Sarmat, nicknamed Satan II by NATO, will be capable of delivering 10 to 16 nuclear warheads to any point on the globe. Just one missile would ever yield 50 times more powerful than the little boy bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. Vladimir Degtyaryov, the CEO of JSC Makiev, the company behind the Sarmat, describes it as unique in terms of its unsurpassed speed, a record-breaking range, the highest accuracy, and complete invulnerability while penetrating anti-missile defense systems. Putin's recent speeches also hint at a terrifying change in attitude. In them, he has emphasized his intention to focus on strengthening Russia's nuclear triad and uncovering the true extent of NATO's strategic arsenals. To quote, If Russia feels its territorial integrity is threatened, we will use all defense methods at our disposal, and this is not a bluff." End quote. Fortunately, Satan II failed its most recent test, which was conducted symbolically on the 18th of February 2023, just 2 days before US President Biden arrived in Ukraine. Putin has also agreed to abide by the numerical limits of New START until it expires in 2026. Unfortunately, this only gives the US 3 years to negotiate a new nuclear arms agreement to supersede it, and with the current tensions, that just seems next to impossible. According to Darrell Kimball, the executive director of the Arms Control Association, it makes it more likely that after New START expires, there will not be limits on the world's 2 largest arsenals for the first time since 1972. So, are we standing at the precipice of the next bilateral nuclear arms race between the United States and Russia? Unfortunately not. And I say unfortunately not because I have any desire to experience a nuclear winter, that would be brilliant, but because the next arms race won't be bilateral. Since the Cold War, new players have entered the scene, players who currently lack any agreements or restrictions on their use of MIRVs. Currently, China, which is urging the US and Russia to renew their commitments to New START, is racing towards nuclear parity with both nations. Their most powerful MIRVed missile is the DF-41. DF stands for Dongfeng, meaning east wind, a name that's poetic and also terrifying in equal measure when you consider that, it's radioactive winds. Again, not brilliant. It can carry 10 warheads, has a top speed of Mach 25, and has a wheeled chassis, allowing it to move and potentially evade a first strike. With a range of 12 to 15,000 kilometers, it can also strike anywhere in India, Europe, or the United States. Supposedly in response to China's growing arsenal, India has also been focusing on strengthening its deterrent nuclear triad. Their MIRV offering is the Agni 5 missile. It has a smaller payload than the DF-41 and a shorter range of up to 8,000 kilometers. But as it has solid fuel technology, it's capable of striking China with exceptional speed. Pakistan is the third point of the triangle of nuclear competition in Asia. With fewer resources, they've been slower to develop their arsenal, but they can now boast the Ababil ballistic missile. It's thought to be able to carry 3 nuclear warheads and has a range of 2,200 kilometers. And of course, let's not forget about North Korea. In January 2021, Kim Jong-un announced his desire to perfect the guidance technology for a multi-warhead rocket. This has caused concerns for Japan and South Korea, whose anti-missile defenses are currently designed to deal with liquid rather than solid fuel, leaving them open to being spotted and destroyed. However, it has forced Japan to reconsider its pacifist stance and look into developing its own counter-strike capability. So, despite MIRVs being a bad idea from the outset and proven as a tool for destabilization in the nuclear arena, here we are, staring down the barrel of an arms race involving multiple nations completely ungoverned by any treaties. Well done, humanity.